1. This story happened many years ago, when I was working with a renovation company. The company would buy very cheap homes, renovate them, and relist them for sale or rent them out. I guess you could call it a house flipping company. It was new, with 3 guys on the construction crew, including the owner, who was also the property manager, and a girl who I only met once or twice that dealt with paperwork. It was a really fun job, especially for me because I would do the general labor like tearing down walls and removing carpet. Anyways, on this one job site, we started on the house first and left the garage alone. This was a very poorly maintained property owned by a wealthy older man who was apparently incredibly overweight and in poor health. His girlfriend was a young foreign lady who loved the house and wanted to renovate it with the money the man would leave her, and his wife was a horrible lady who ended up taking the house and a lot of savings. Allegedly. The woman sold the property to my boss for a pretty low amount of money, and the girlfriend stopped by to look at the property when she saw the crew dropping off their tools. She went into the empty living room and cried. It was pretty sad, but it wasn't like we were going to give her the house for free because she was sad, and she couldn't afford to buy it. The boss also had no intention of renting out this property because he hated being a landlord, because the tenants he had had on his 3 properties were all very needy, and he had an incident where a TELUS employee destroyed one of his walls installing something that made him declare that he would never bother with renting out his properties ever again, so that he wouldn't have to deal with BS. We spent a few days working on the house, and when we got to the garden, we prepared the fence to be removed so that we could set up a new fence. We went to the garage to see if there was anything valuable that we could sell or keep, and see what we needed to throw away. We found 3 cool things that we decided to keep. One was an antique fire extinguisher. It looked really cool. One was a very long and rusty plumbing snake. And the last thing was a 1970s Dodge Charger. I don't know the year. Someone said it could have been 1974, but I did a Google search and it looked like it could have been 71 or 73. The car wasn't well maintained. Some teenagers broke into the garage and did some damage to the engine and stole a tire. They also destroyed some spray paint cans, leaving a mess to clean up, but it didn't affect the car. Plus, the owner had no idea the car was there, and he had no idea where the key was. The plan was to scrap the car. We did take a door from it and gave it to someone who was friends with the owner that wanted it. It's possible the tire was missing before the teens showed up, but we think they took it, then came back to take something else and or continue messing with the car. I did mention that the reason there was engine damage was because the car was pretty beat up in places, like it was smashed repeatedly with a hammer, which is where the damage to the engine came from. The boss knew it was teenagers because he saw them running away. The neighbor who appears in the next paragraph knew about the condition of the car, but he still wanted it. In fact, the condition was why he expected us to give it to him for free. The neighbor saw that we had opened the garage and decided to talk to us while we were sitting outside, waiting for the boss to get back with some lunch for us. The neighbor seemed friendly, until he brought up the car. He said that the neighbor had agreed to give him the car but passed away before he could, so we should give him the keys. We told him that we didn't have the keys, and the man's face got dark. It looked like he was angry with us. But he smiled and tried to convince us to give him the keys, and we told him we didn't have them. The guy left in a huff. The boss brought us our food. We told him what happened, and all was good. The next day we worked, and a similar thing happened again, but this time the boss was there and explained to him that he didn't have the keys and he didn't want the car, going as far as to tell the guy that he could hotwire it or tow it himself if he wanted it. The guy still thought we were lying and left. Later that day, when the rest of the crew had left and the boss was the only one there, the man appeared again and apparently got into a heated argument with my boss. My boss got so angry that he called a towing company and got them to tow it to a scrapyard while the guy watched, screaming and swearing at my boss. My boss then told him, "Don't bother my workers ever again or I will call the police." I heard about the incident the next day when I asked where the car was. We finished up the job almost without issues. If you're wondering, these were the issues we came across. One room in the house was wired up with extension cords in the walls. The vents weren't up to code. There was asbestos in the ceiling that had to be removed. We also had an encounter with some sketchy dealers that ended when the boss informed him that he had a side hustle years ago as one of the biggest dealers in the area and still had connections, which included being friendly with their boss, who was a notorious meth dealer, known for being someone you didn't want to mess with. They left us alone after that. My boss was a multi-millionaire, by the way. The entire business was just a fun side project for him, where he got to hang with his buddies and do some fun work with his expensive tools. 2. This is not one story, but multiple. For a little bit of context, I have a 7-month-old Doberman puppy, and she is a pretty difficult dog, even for her breed. This requires me to be strict and have some very clear rules. She responds well to this, and things are honestly going as well as they could. Anyone who has raised a puppy knows how difficult they can be at this time, and she is definitely no exception. You'd think that people being helpful would be good, but my experience so far has been that people aren't being helpful, but rather being entitled. I can count the amount of people who have actually been friendly about it on one hand, though I have lost count of the ones that are judgmental or condescending. Anyway, here are some of my experiences. Story number 1 was when I had just gotten her, and I saw this man with a really big and off-the-leash dog approaching. So I tried to tell him that our dogs probably shouldn't meet. I don't know him, his dog, and I didn't think it was the appropriate time. I guess I was both super tired and just caught off guard, because I stumbled through my words a lot. He demanded to know why I didn't want them to meet, and when I struggled to explain why, he seemed to get really angry. I managed to explain that I was thinking of training her to be a service animal, but before I could explain anything else, he basically started yelling at me. He went on about how I was abusing her and whatnot. I was honestly super stressed because it was the middle of nowhere with no one to ask for help and nowhere to run to. So I don't remember exactly everything he said. I do remember saying that she has dog friends, but I guess unless I let her meet every dog we come across, it is not good enough. He walked off, but then stopped in the distance and started yelling some more. It really seemed like he was going to turn back around and do something worse, so I took my chance and quickly walked back to the train station, and I didn't stop there until there were a few people in sight. Luckily, he didn't follow me. My dog was kind of anxious around strangers, both humans and dogs. After that, and it's only now that she's finally back to where we started, mostly just to get her to ignore people and dogs again because I was forced to let her meet a bunch of strangers until she was no longer scared. I really did my best to be as calm as possible, but this guy was honestly terrifying. He was so busy accusing me of traumatizing my dog that he didn't even care to think he was doing just that. Story 2 is a lot less scary, it's a short one. But I keep thinking about how stupid it is. I was walking my dog, and on walks, I do not let her meet dogs for various reasons. She does go to the dog park often. I see a stranger with 2 tiny dogs walking in the direction where I'm going, so to make sure my puppy doesn't get too distracted, which would result in me having to correct her, I walked the other way and gave her lots of rewards for successfully keeping her focus on me. This guy yells at me that I don't need to walk the other way. I looked back, but then decided to ignore him, as at this point I knew not to argue with strangers who want to give advice. He yelled at me again, saying that I need to socialize my dog. He didn't sound angry like the other dude, but I still don't understand why you'd yell this at a stranger. You don't know me, my dog, or why I'm doing this, so why judge? There could be 1,000 different reasons why I decided to do that, and none are his business. For all he knew, it is to keep his dog safe. Story 3 happened to me today, and is pretty similar to the last. Though with this one I have a history. His really dominant and rather mean GSD approached my puppy once. When he was off-leash, my terrified puppy, 9 weeks old at the time, was screaming at the top of her lungs, and he refused to call his dog back, saying he wouldn't listen anyway and that my puppy would just have to learn. This dog was just standing over her and invading her personal space, while she was so young and small and absolutely terrified. Although my puppy overreacted in the situation, there is no way she would learn to feel safe that way. This went way too far, and I made sure to not walk in that area again. She's still afraid of GSDs, even though she likes all other dogs. I ran into him again, though this time his dog was leashed. I made my puppy sit and look at me, so this man could pass, and surprisingly, she did incredibly well. What wasn't surprising was that the other dog tried to pull his owner towards us, though he luckily did keep walking. Not before yelling at me to give my dog more freedom, though, followed by how I need to socialize her, and that now there was no way she would amount to anything. Damn, never gonna get that job in Wall Street. I was already having a bad day, and this made me very angry. But I ignored him, and my dog actually did really well. Story 4 is a bit different, as it was on social media. I posted a few pictures of my dog on Instagram, not really bothering with a description or anything. They were just random cute pictures. However, on the internet you were apparently guilty until proven innocent, and I kept getting comments from a few people telling me that my dog is dangerous and basically demanding that I justify myself by assuring them I am training her well. They kept asking me questions and making assumptions, even though there was absolutely no reason to think I am not doing a good job, nor that I didn't do any research. I never replied to these comments until I had a bad day, and I told them it wasn't any of their business. I soon realized this wouldn't help and just blocked them all, after which I took a break from social media. It was just so weird that these random people are assuming the worst about me for no reason. Last story. This isn't about someone giving me advice per se, but definitely an entitled person. I was walking my puppy and 2 women walked by. I greeted them, before one stopped and told her friend to wait because she was going to pet my puppy. She didn't ask me, didn't look at me, and didn't hesitate even for a second. She basically just informed me that this was about to go down, and her tone was absolutely awful. No matter how much you like a dog you see, and no matter how cute you think it is, don't just go and pet a stranger's dog without permission. When she was very little, dozens of people walked over and just reached over to pet her without even looking at me, completely ignoring the 4 "do not pet" signs she was wearing. I think only like 3 people in total ever asked if it was okay. Anyway, I politely told her that I didn't want her to pet my dog. She asked if my dog was aggressive and I said no, so she demanded to know why she wasn't allowed. I told her I am training her right now. She informed me that I do need to socialize my dog. I told her that I would be happy to do that whenever I see fit, which wasn't right now. I guess even though I was polite, I made it clear I wasn't about to argue with her, because her attitude changed and she walked off while her friend laughed. Having a Doberman has really done wonders for my confidence and the way I handle things, especially if you look back at the first story. For the record, I have socialized my dog and will continue to do so. It's just that walks are not the right time for this because of her personality, trust me. And also because of what I'm trying to achieve with my training. She gets to meet dogs and people at moments where it's appropriate and safe to do so, and people who know how to act around my dog. I have tons of experiences like this, and it's honestly so frustrating, but I will not make this post any longer than it already is. If anything, I have learned that other people have terrible opinions. Everyone is a dog expert, and that I should just ignore people who are quick to judge based on extremely limited information. Most people are just not worth your time, really. 3. Hey everybody, I'm back with another anecdote, and this one is relatively fresh, only a couple of days old. So I'm friends with a guy named Bruce. He is the younger brother of my best friend, and I've watched him grow up since his brother and I became friends in 4th grade. There's a 10-year age gap between us, give or take, and that being said, he is one of the most mature people I know. So when this event happened, it caught me completely off guard. I stated before, he's a pretty mature guy for his age, only 30, but carries himself like somebody who is wise beyond their years. A relatively easygoing guy, he works a high-stress job in quality control at a local chicken plant. This time of year is particularly stressful due to the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday, so about a week before the event in question, he and I met up at a local pub for some beers and conversation. He lets me know he asked off for the night of the Paul Tyson fight. He's positively chomping at the bit and really looking forward to this thing, and I have to let him down gently. I remind him of our age gap and let him know that whenever somebody wanted to see Tyson fight when I was much younger, they had to do it via pay-per-view, $40 to $60, depending on your company and for what. The fight lasts 5 minutes on average, and a knockout in the first round. The good old Don King days. Of course, I wasn't getting through to him, and I really hate to be that guy, but I just didn't want him to get his hopes up. We changed the topic for a little while, but as I was getting ready to go, he asked me if I wanted to come over and watch the fight with him and his brother. I was not one to say no to time with the boys, especially when they're more family than anything else. So I agree, tell him I'll bring some Taco Bell with me. And we make those plans. The week goes by in a blink, and the next thing I know, I find myself pulling up to his apartment building with an armload of gorditas and 5-layer burritos. Bruce's brother, Dave, lets me in and takes the bags to the little kitchen off the corner of the living room from me. Okay, picture this. On the couch, I see a 30-year-old man wearing a Mike Tyson t-shirt he'd purchased off of Redbubble, a screen grab during the Phil Collins scene in The Hangover. He's rubbing his hands together in anticipation like a kid getting ready to try out their new game system on Christmas morning. Dave looks at me, and I can tell we basically have the same feeling. This is not going to go how he thinks it is. We shoot each other a knowing look before going out to the living room with the food and drinks. Now, for those of you who were unfortunate to watch the fight, or at least what consisted of a fight, you already know how it went down, but for those of you who somehow missed the memo, it went a bit like this. Bruce pulls up Netflix on his smart TV, he gets the live stream ready to go, and we all plop down in front of the TV. It starts buffering and buffering and buffering. And the only clear shot most of us can remember is Mike Tyson walking around in what was basically a thong. The buffering was so severe that by the time the fight actually started, it was just a series of bits and pieces, fragmented and pixelated, like a dying Xbox 360 hard drive. It was completely unwatchable. And by the time the dust had settled and we finally got some streaming clarity, the fight was over. Paul won on technicalities. Things go quiet. So quiet you can hear a pin drop. So quiet you could hear a camel scream somewhere off in the distance as a straw broke its back. Bruce gets up from the couch, and he's standing there stoically for a moment. As soon as the moment is over, though, he goes full-out caveman. He starts out by, how should I put this, curb-stomping his little thrift store coffee table that made an IKEA table look like it was meant for royalty. Bits of splintering lumber that are more or less a step above balsa wood go flying as his size 11.5 work boot plunges through it. He proceeds to attempt to kick the table off of himself once he realizes what he's done, and he's cursing in several different languages. I never knew he was bilingual, let alone octolingual. He lifts up his leg, and as the table is hanging off of his shin, one good kick, he sends the remainder of the frame flying across the room, where it smashes against his apartment door. Remember the bag of Taco Bell? We had just barely broken into the thing. I downed a 5-layer burrito. Bruce and Dave had a couple gorditas each, but the bag was still half full. Bruce starts lobbing the remnants of our meal around the room like an angry silverback gorilla being taunted at the zoo. Mexican-adjacent fast food splatters against the walls, the windows. Some even got into the ceiling fan that was on full power, therefore causing what basically equated to a Mortal Kombat fatality's worth of burrito guts to get everywhere, and I mean everywhere. He's breathing intensely. Chest is heaving wildly. He's even foaming at the mouth a little, and he just launches into a tirade that explains everything, but doesn't excuse it.
Damn it, man. Damn it, man. Was it too much to ask for the fight to be watchable? Was it too much to ask for that ingrown good hair to finally be put on his butt by a legend? What the hell was that? Why did I take off for this? I could have been working, but what would the point be? We're not getting our Thanksgiving bonuses this year. Between rent, groceries, gas, and my auto insurance, there's no way in hell I'll be able to afford a gift for my girlfriend. I was depending on that. This was going to be a little way for me to de-stress, and I can't even have that. Son of a bitch. I'm canceling my Netflix.
I'm sitting there shocked. In all of the time I've known this man, I've never once seen him lose his temper, but now that I knew that this was a result of a lot of underlying stress he didn't feel like he could talk about that night over beers, things started to make a lot more sense. However, I was still freaked out. Thankfully, Dave was able to calm him down, and we helped him clean up the apartment. The whole time he's apologizing because once he came down, he realized how bad everything looked. I gave it until earlier today, once I was pretty confident things blew over. I gave Bruce a call. He immediately starts the conversation off with another apology, and I have a feeling this is how things are going to go for a little bit. Even though I told him no apology is necessary because he had done it shortly after the whole incident, I know he's embarrassed. I feel for the guy, I really do, and it's a real shame we've gotten to the point where guys my age feel as if we can't talk about something that's truly bothering us before it festers into an overblown situation that could ultimately be avoided with a simple conversation. I did something this morning that should help ease a little bit of his stress. Granted, I'm struggling myself, but my Christmas shopping was done a little bit before Halloween. I had some cash to spare, so I put it in a card for him. It isn't much, just a couple $100. But that's my play money for when I decide to go to the movies on my own or whatever. With the exception of Nosferatu coming out, there's nothing really playing that I haven't already had the chance to see, and so I figured it wasn't the biggest loss. But he and I are going to have a long conversation about that outburst. If he's that stressed and he's not telling people, I want him to understand there is no shame in admitting you're feeling that damn much weight on your shoulders. I would say I'm looking forward to our once-a-month Monday Night Raw night, but there's one slight caveat. It's going to start streaming on one of the biggest services in January. Want to take a guess which one? Yeah, let's hope they get their stuff together by then. I don't want Blowout 2.0. Four. I work at a local restaurant in my town as a waiter. In May of this year, our previous general manager, Cherry, had resigned due to pregnancy and other personal life events, so it was about 3 or 4 months before we had finally hired a new general manager, Jackson. Jackson seemed like a nice guy and everything, a little quiet and standoffish at first, which was a contrast from our bubbly and more outgoing manager, Cherry. But completely understandable, nonetheless, because he was in a whole new environment. Little did we all know that these wouldn't be the only contrast from Cherry. When I tell you guys that Jackson was a complete letdown, I really can't stress enough. Here are some examples of just how he let us all down. He would constantly show up late, or not show up at all for his job without even calling the restaurant. Mind you, this is the same guy who is meant to hold all of us employees below his authority to the same standard of communicating with your job. And he was also the same guy who scheduled all of our hours, and there were quite a few issues with this first problem. We were often led to wonder what in the world was going on with our GM when he wouldn't arrive when scheduled. He would also often show up to work much later on in the day, or the next day with a pitiful excuse, if he even had one at all. One day he did not show up at all, and no one could get a hold of this guy on the phone. He then showed up the next day and had the audacity to say something along the lines of, "Well, it doesn't matter why I was gone, it just matters that I'm here now." This, to me, is very reminiscent of the scenes from the Brady Bunch movie, where the father always had some motivational quote that really wasn't anything at all, like, "Wherever you go, there you are." Jackson would often leave to go help his girlfriend, who supposedly worked at a shop around the corner from us, and sometimes not even let us know. Once when this happened, only myself and one cook were there to run the entire restaurant. Luckily, we were not busy at all that day, but it's still the principle of what Jackson did. When he came back and nonchalantly said, "Oh yeah, I just had to help my girlfriend with a few things at her job." I'm sure there were people at his girlfriend's job who could have helped her, but whatever. Jackson left before his shift was over, with or without notifying any of us, before another waitress, Sarah, came to work. Sarah happened to be late that day and called to let us know, thank God. I told her that I would let Jackson know, but I could not find him due to the lack of communication. Sometimes if you're late, you have to use a manager's card to clock in late. When Sarah arrived, she was about to do this, but because Jackson was gone and none of us could find him, we all finally realized he wasn't there. She had to call another manager, a shift manager, Brenda, and wait for her to come to clock her in. She had to wait 2 or 3 hours to clock into her own job. Never would this guy apologize or anything for all of this. He would just come back to work whenever he pleased and, of course, act like nothing was out of the ordinary. He didn't work around people's schedules when needed. Our last manager, Cherry, was good about working around other people's schedules whenever we needed it, as long as we gave her enough notice and time. Jackson, on the other hand, didn't. We had a big amount of new cooks and hosts that applied and got the job at our restaurant shortly after Jackson stepped in. I'll say we gained like 8 workers, and while that seemed good and promising, he didn't work around their schedules like he should have. If I remember correctly, all but 1 or 2 of our new staff quit almost immediately after joining. He would order things that the restaurant did not need, while neglecting things that we did need. One time our dishwasher was breaking down during rush hour, which slowed us down considerably. When another one of our shift managers, Kalen, called and asked for help, he somehow got out of our call of need that we needed more pancake batter when no one even mentioned anything about that. He also proceeded to hang up on her and did not arrive to help us at all that day. He did not follow dress code. Us employees have a dress code to wear all black, but managers can wear whatever as long as they look professional. One day, Jackson came in with some sweats and a hoodie on, and when another waitress, Tara, called him out for the double standard, he left to go home and never came back for the rest of the day. His last day working there. This was a complete crap show. Everything you could think of was going wrong in this morning. We had faulty kitchen equipment, the dishwasher, and now the machines that will send orders that the servers typed into the machines to the cook line. Because of all this, it was unfortunately taking a lot of tables around over an hour to receive their food. This was also during rush hour. Eventually, we had to put a hold on the orders and pause seating new guests, because there was no way any of us could catch up to where we needed to be and then take on new customers. And to top it all off, Jackson, of all people, was in charge to manage this crap. Jackson did his usual thing of not doing his job like he should. He even had the nerve to try and boss other people around without doing much to help any of us. Eventually, he disappeared without notifying anyone. I and another waitress, Abby, needed help with something that only Jackson could have helped us with since he's the manager, so we looked around the restaurant and could not find him. We then went outside and into the parking lot to find him, but his car was nowhere to be found. During all of this, we had very upset customers who wanted to speak to the manager. But I had to be honest and tell them that we had no manager here with us because he was out there doing whatever it was that he does. Probably unprofessional to say, but he was very unprofessional, and it was true. We then had to let the other staff know what had happened, and Tara had to call Kaylin to notify her. By this point, Jackson had been written up many times for his previous incidents that I had talked about, but he had one last chance, and he just now blew it. Kaylin ended up calling him to fire him, but he decided to quit on the spot so that he couldn't be fired. So Kaylin had to step in to help for the rest of the day. No more Jackson. Jackson was fired about 2 months ago, and since then, Brenda has had to step up as general manager, which honestly was the best choice considering she had worked at our restaurant for almost 20 years and had more experience at other restaurants in the past before that. Oh, and 2 more things. I need to mention now that I mentioned he was fired. He did not keep up with the bills and utilities of the restaurant. We found all this out after he quit, so it was between Kaylin and Brenda to step in and catch up on all this. We also found out after he quit that he was fired from several other jobs as general manager before being hired by us. I don't know how he managed to get hired at our restaurant, but he did. This explains why he quit before we fired him, so that he couldn't say he was fired again. I also want to emphasize again that Cherry was a really good general manager. I think she actually cared about her job and her employees, which is a rarity these days. So it was sad to see her leave. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for Jackson at all. So that was the story of our entitled and useless previous general manager, Jackson. Nobody has ever seen him again, and I can only pray for whichever place hires him next. 5. I think there is something special about a campground that brings out the inner Karen in people that otherwise might be a little more stable or understanding. For those that are unfamiliar, campers and motorhomes, for the most part, have all their utility connections on the driver's side of the unit, and as such, all of our campsites are configured to allow those connections to be as close as possible. Karen steps out of the passenger side of the truck, pulling a large fifth-wheel camper, yelling that I have parked them facing the wrong direction, and now they will have to figure out how to back out of this spot. Mind you, she is yelling loud enough to catch the attention of nearby campers. I explained to her that no, her connections should be on the driver's side. When her husband steps out, she yells to him that they are parked the wrong direction. He takes one glance and tells her, "No, he is right," thanks me for the help and sends me on my way. Seeing Karen get shut down by her significant other was quite pleasing. Recently, we had a Google review left by a cabin Karen. Our campground has small cabins and glamping tents that are available to rent. For the most part, we do not have large stadium lighting in the campground. It would kind of defeat the purpose of going camping to be lit up like the local Dollar Tree parking lot. Cabin Karen wrote an entire paragraph about how they had to use flashlights to navigate their way to the bathhouse at night, and how she feels it is unsafe for it to be that dark around the property. Someone could get seriously hurt. I jokingly told the property manager that we can offer to show that guest to the nearest Walmart parking lot for her next camping adventure. One of the rules in the campground is not to park on the grass or in the through roads. We like to keep our grass nice, and the through roads have to be kept open for other campers and for fire lane access. Additional parking is available in our overflow lot, that is at the edge of the property. Karen decides that she is not going to walk all the way to the overflow when there is an unused site right next to hers. While valeting a late-night arrival, I find that their site is taken by Karen's white Lexus that is oddly devoid of the parking pass that would identify what site the vehicle is attached to. We had an alternate site to take the arrival, and I take them there and leave a note to address the white Lexus with the office staff. The next morning, our staff makes contact with Karen about the misparked vehicle, and she tells our crew that she is not going to walk all the way to the overflow when there are unused sites she can park in. Imagine her surprise when she was billed for the use of the second site. She proceeded to call our upper management about this issue, and was told that she was lucky we didn't charge her additional fees, that we had to relocate another camper that had reserved the site she had decided to park in. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Idiots in the Wild, episode 184. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please hit the like button and share the video with friends and family, and please do support me on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description. Also a link to the new channel, possibly, if I remember to put it in, if you'd like to join us over there too. Alright, no other business today, so let's move along to Hellfreezer's question of the day, and today's question is: if you had the choice, and money was not an option, of course, would you prefer your home, if you live in a house, would you prefer to have a nice garden, which you would have to tend, however, lots of trees and plants and things, lots of grass, or would you like it just kind of all paved off? Personally, if I had a way, I'd probably just want to get rid of the grass part, but I've got trees in my garden, which I quite like, but I'd want to get rid of the grass, because I hate mowing the lawn. I'm not very fond of trimming hedges either. Well, the trimming part's not so bad, it's the cleanup afterwards. Let me know what you think in a comment below. And before we go, we'll take a look at the answer of the day from a previous video. And this comes from Idiots in the Wild, 183. I think the question was, what kind of sauces do you like to have with your ice cream? And today's answer comes from Moonlight. I especially love most fruit sauces from scratch. If store-bought, absolutely caramel. Thank you very much for your answer, Moonlight. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.